Okay, I was gonna let you finish.
See it right away.
Look on the website.
Got the
Okay.
turnabout so fast.
Go ahead and call the meeting to order. And we will start here with, well, council's here, commission's here.
We're here.
We could do a very long roll call if we wanted to.
We'll write down who's here. We do have a couple of folks joining us virtually. John Horn and Lisa Weifels are joining us virtually.
Welcome, you guys.
We did
Oh.
hear that we might have at least one or two other folks joining us virtually as well. So we'll keep you apprised as anyone joins.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think, unless anyone else has anything they want to bring up right off the bat, maybe we get into the PUD standards conversation, and then after that, with whatever time we have left, we can kind of open it up to anything people want to bring up.
Staff had questions. Do we want to go through like their questions one at a time?
Yeah, we can,
We do have a short presentation if you would like.
yeah, let's
Or if you'd
do
like
that.
us to do the,
Let's do the presentation so everyone kind of has a baseline of understanding, and then we'll try to go through the questions. I think I've got most of them marked. And then if any other questions come up during it, feel free to just shoot them out, and we can
Thank you.
start tackling them.
Here. So this topic is regarding the working draft of our planned unit development ordinance to add some standards for review as well as a higher threshold for our approval procedure. This was a 2022 priority, and we've now had 3 work sessions on it with the council and staff. And this will be our 4th work session tonight. We would like to get commissioner feedback. Next slide. Just a quick summary of the staff report. Some of the topics that council wanted to specifically talk about tonight was supermajority approval threshold. We are looking at a 4/5 majority of the seated council to give us a bit of flexibility in case a couple of council members are gone at a meeting, there can still be a vote, so we don't run up against a review deadline. The city attorney did email me today with some revised language as he continues to think about how to capture the council's intent. So basically, 4/5 vote of the eligible council members who are present at the time of a vote, and in no event shall such approval be achieved by less than 3 votes. Approvals of a proposed amendment to a planned unit development district would require a simple majority as it currently requires. Next slide. So then our open space requirements, there was some talk about having a sliding scale instead of a flat 15% requirement, having something that is based on the size of the lot. So we can definitely adjust in terms of what parameters we're looking at in terms of lot width or lot size. But just as a baseline, I've provided this table that bases the open space requirement on the requested minimum lot size. One of our underlying low-density residential districts allows for 65-foot lots, so that's why I'm saying if they're proposing that, then there wouldn't be an additional open space requirement, but anything less than that would start to get a higher open space requirement. Next slide. Another point of discussion is when should the neighborhood meeting occur? This will be in addition with the amendments that we require developers to host a neighborhood meeting. And there is a little bit of hesitation with staff to say whether it'd be better to have it at the sketch plan stage or after the sketch plan prior to preliminary approvals or denial, but a preliminary application. The thinking being sketch plans often have policy questions for the council, and it might make things very difficult for the council to answer neighborhood questions that are going to likely come in after a neighborhood meeting if they themselves haven't learned about the project. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And then also have an outstanding discussion on the PUD benefit categories and possible points. Basically, the current categories and the number of points possible for each category, reflecting our goals as a city, what we want to see in developments, our ideals. Are there additional categories that we should add? Should some categories be removed? Should we adjust the number of points? And basically, my recommendation is to assign the more points where we want to encourage that behavior. So if we want to see something, then that should have more points, relatively speaking. And next slide, I think that's it. So slides are obviously there for reference if we want to go back to anything, but let me know what questions we have.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions off the bat on what Natalie just went over? Or we can start getting into some of those specifics. Dean?
The thing that sticks out is the neighborhood meeting. If we could invite the neighborhood to the sketch plan with us, so they can hear the conversation and such. I'm getting a lot when all of a sudden it's like, well, we're already at PUD, you guys have already talked to them twice or 3 times, and it's like, no, we've had one conversation at, I call it a napkin meeting. It's called
Yes.
sketch plan. Is there,
We could offer, we could put in the code to send out to.
invite them to the
properties.
meeting, but it's not
So,
for public hearing, so to speak?
well, and that's my concern, is we encourage public comment at
Yeah.
most stages in the city council meeting, and wouldn't want this to turn into a public hearing if you haven't even decided you support, like generally support the project moving forward. Because if you give negative feedback,
Now you
they
made,
will pull out. So that's just, it's kind of like what comes first.
no, you make
And
sense
I don't
now.
want to rile someone up if it's something that's not going to move forward.
I'm glad I asked. Thank you.
That is a good conversation to have on when exactly that is the best point. I think.
I just did last 2, the one at the Country Farm, or Corcoran Farms, and then the one on Highway 55. Both neighborhoods, everyone that talked to me said, well, you guys have already made your decision. We just
On a
had concept plan. We like the concept plan, or we had concerns, but
Right.
they're choosing to continue to move on and bring it to
And I think
planning and us as preliminary plat.
the Pioneer Industrial Group heard some of the comments at the public hearing and decided on their own volition to have that neighborhood meeting that was here. So I think that it would definitely be beneficial that it happens before an official application is submitted for the preliminary. So it could be like, this isn't even a complete application until you've hosted
Yeah.
that neighborhood
The
meeting.
biggest surprise on that one is they stood here at concept plan and told us that they'd already had that neighborhood meeting. They went and talked to all those neighbors north and west of them. They told us that in the meeting. Did I believe it? No. And I was right. They did not talk to but one. And it was the one that the person said, can I keep having my parties? Can I keep maintaining that piece of parcel that's gonna be on the other side of the wetland? And that was the only neighbor they've met with, but they did say to stand here and tell us that they already met with the neighborhood. They all understand the status and everything else, but,
Well, and I would certainly need to be a part of, like,
true, yeah.
I would need to be, not necessarily there, depending on where it's hosted, but I would need to know when it's happening. I would want to be privy to the information that's getting mailed out to the neighborhood. So I think that would be a
Yeah.
procedure that we put into place, so that it isn't like, oh, we hosted it and it's done. No, I would need some clear evidence that, yes,
Yeah.
it's been hosted. And likely I would be there, or Kendra would be there, or whatever planner is working on the project would need to attend.
You'd probably want to have a recording of it in case promises were made to
Sure.
confirm that they end up in the plan.
I don't know if we can do recording, but we could require minutes. I don't know exactly how we would record it if it's not at City Hall. Like, City Hall, we definitely have capabilities to record. If they choose to do it like a church or something that's more local, I don't know if we would have that capability. I can certainly look into it, but, okay.
Well, there's a suggestion of staff of holding the first Thursday of every month open for it.
Yes, if they decided to do that. We were talking about making sure that the space is an option for developers, but if if a church is something that's more local to the neighborhood and they are able to work that out with the church or something, that's just. I
Or in
think
summer, they might just do it out.
They might just do it at a park or something like that.
Can we be out of that? Like, as-
If we're gonna require a neighborhood meeting, I really don't think we can be out of it.
It's
We
not
do not
required,
have
though.
enough meeting space. No, we are requiring it with the current draft. That was some feedback that we would require a neighborhood meeting.
We're not requiring it necessarily to be here.
Correct. We're just having the option here because we don't have a lot of meeting space in Corcoran. That is,
So if it's a required thing, we have to have the city actually be a part of it in some meaningful way?
I don't-
With people attending and the,
I wouldn't
don't
say
have
that
to
we need
attend.
to attend it, no. I'm saying that having this space
Excuse me.
be available for the developer, like we did for Pioneer Trail, because there is not a lot of meeting space in Corcoran, especially in the winter, that could be quite difficult. So the council would not need to attend, commissioners would not need to attend unless they truly wanted to. A staff person, if it's here, would have to attend to be able to open and close the doors. So, but we would make it very clear that this is the developers meeting, that I'm not making any promises for the city, that I'm just here to listen, kind of. That is kind of what we decided when we did the Pioneer Trail neighborhood meeting.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like having the option of being here. I thought it was valuable to have that meeting here. You know, they could use the overhead, but we also heard things that they were saying, and we were able to interject at points, making it clear that the comments that they were making were not binding through the city.
Right.
So we were able to provide some color in that regard. I have no problem with it being here. I think it's probably a good idea for it to be in this location. But I would suggest that they have it, it should be prior to the planning commission meeting on the preliminary plat. And there should be enough, it shouldn't be the day of. There should be maybe like between 60 and 30 days prior to, or something like that.
Yeah, I think having it before the formal preliminary application is submitted would be essential.
I like what you said about it. That's a requirement for the application to be complete.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So I
One
can
other
make that
advantage
work.
we get, if they do it earlier, they can actually accrue points on the point system for adopting resident feedback and putting items that residents request into the plan, to give an incentive for them not just to present as a dump and run, but to
Correct.
present and actually collaborate.
You're saying like if they did it earlier, then they'd have time to
Right.
potentially do that?
Yeah, and it is a point category if they can show that they have incorporated feedback from the neighborhood in some meaningful way. And sometimes neighborhood feedback, it's gonna conflict with no matter what they're proposing. But if they're making some clear effort, like I think Cook Lake Highlands is a great example of that, because they really went back and revised their plan based on the feedback. And it still wasn't perfect. There was still opposition, but they made a clear effort to try to incorporate additional amenities, and making the product something that could fit within the neighborhood. So,
I think you have to have it early enough, given the timing between Parks and Trails and planning. You know, Parks and Trails will hear it on the third Thursday of the month, right,
So,
prior.
Just to be clear, when, just it would be before they can even submit the application. So the Parks and Trail Commission meeting and the planning meeting aren't scheduled until we have
Oh, that's
a
it.
complete application.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, to Jeremy's point about providing feedback, if you just did it on the first Thursday of the month, the first time these people would hear about it in the community is the day, like, per se, the planning commission hears about it, the first Thursday of the month, right? And there's not time to provide much feedback in that regard, make changes.
No, so, I mean, and maybe I'm not understanding it, but
Well, if they had everything up until the point about holding the public meeting is held at 5 to 6:30, have a complete application, couldn't they be heard that day?
No, so the application wouldn't be complete, and so I wouldn't send them an application with
Okay.
scheduled meeting dates until, like, so the way it currently works is they submit a land use application, and I have to go through and review that they have submitted all the components. If they don't have some component of the application, some supporting documentation, it's an incomplete application, and we do not schedule it.
Okay.
They get an incomplete notice, and we continue to work through it until it's complete, then it gets scheduled. So what I'm saying is this would be a requirement that they have to meet in order for the application to be
Okay.
complete. it
So there's
wouldn't
no
run up
way
to-
they could do it the same day?
Correct. This would be a
Good.
months-long
That
process.
makes sense.
Okay.
Yep. It would essentially add a little bit of time to the processes, but hopefully get us.
I think it's valuable.
The value.
And getting some collaboration as well, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
You find that beneficial as commissions?
Well, I think, pardon me, is it okay if I speak? Like, I don't know. if this was
You
gonna-
are a commissioner.
I definitely see a value, right? But I also see some potential for like, are we really looking at the potential issues that could come out of it. Not because we want to imagine every worst case possible scenario, but like, are we prepared for if it doesn't work out the best that it possibly could? So for instance, I'm just thinking to myself, like, it's different than the legal process of posting for a public hearing, correct?
So we could identify the space. I would say I'd probably need to match the public hearing. So if we're talking about a 500-foot radius for public hearings, moving up from 350 to 500, so then I would foresee that the neighborhood meeting, they would have that same notice boundary.
Okay. Okay. And then I just, in my experience, I guess, sitting through some of the public hearings and just hearing how they go and how some of the communication works, and it's obviously the developers' meeting, so they would be in charge of it and running it, and then, mediating through any kind of feedback opportunities that are arisen. I just think, do see a lot of great potential for really, really good feedback, and obviously we would hope that there would be collaboration, but man, I don't know. I don't know, what feeling of frustration, I guess, would there be if there is sort of this dump and run, like I did it, and now residents felt like they had an opportunity to buy into the collaborative process, and they're still not seeing things. Is it going to make it more frustrating to approve or deny things as they come through? Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's say residents have a great meeting, they bring in a lot of collaboration, but in terms of like what the residents are seeing as benefits, from a bird's eye view, or the view that you hold or we hold as a city doesn't match that, like, are we potentially creating, some more angst? Or is it, or inviting them into the collaboration, we're kind of asking them to see things from the other perspective? And is that something that most residents are willing and able to do in terms of engaging in that process?
I'd hate to falsely empower people, give them the impression that they get say, and the last project is an example of none of the residents wanted it. It fit the zoning, and I don't know if they had the community meeting anyways, but if we compelled somebody to have a community meeting, it kind of would create the impression that the community has a say, and I'm not sure anything good would have come out of it. And you'd essentially, suppose they did have a meeting and nobody wanted anything there, then we would penalize the developer for not collaborating with the landowners, even if they had a complete incompatible vision of what that spot would be. So I kind of, like, part of me doesn't think that anyone should have to have a community meeting if they don't want to. But if they do, because to me, it kind of gets in, property rights are a big thing for me. So if I wanted to do something within my property that could be done, I wouldn't want anybody to tell me I had to have a meeting with my neighbors about what I'm gonna do. So I'm not saying the same thing you are, but
Don't we kind of have that though? This is for PUD. If they were to come with the ordinance,
They wouldn't have.
and you followed the ordinance,
Sure.
nobody has a say in it because we've already got the ordinances in place. But if they want special things,
yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about that.
I like what you're saying. They brought up a lot of the same stuff we all thought of if we lived next to it. But on that last one, that sign's been up for 20 years, and there's been 2 other times that I think approval has been made to put it in a light industrial park. And many of those people have been there a long time, and they were saying they never knew anything about those.
Right.
So it's,
Is it just a disclosure statement, right? That indicates like, this is a meeting where this is what we hope happens, but here's our disclosure statement.
Yeah.
Because it may be, right, that the goal of the city is, in essence, doesn't match with that individual, like the individual concerns potentially that are being brought up by the
Another
residents.
good thing that was brought up, and Alan, I think you said this, is Corcoran Farms, they're gonna been 40-foot tall buildings. And the PUD brought them down to 25 feet, a couple of them, and, I mean, there's some elevation changes that were good parts of the PUD. But, I mean, then to sit there and think, if I was a neighbor, well, they're threatening me. If I don't say yes to 25 foot, they're gonna just, to heck with it, we aren't even gonna do a PUD, we're gonna put up the tallest building and the largest building possible, and minimal landscaping per ordinances and those kind of things, and then the neighbors don't have a say. But I think the PUD is one of those things, they're asking for something. Is it something we can have the attitude that the neighbors have the right to say, we'd like to see some of these things too, to kind of make it fit better, so.
I like the new purpose statement in the updated draft. And part of it says that one of the things we're trying to accomplish is assure compatibility with surrounding land uses and neighborhood character.
Yeah.
And this is really, I think, a mechanism to try to find out what that would be in this particular case as it's being proposed. What does fitting in look like? Not that it's always going to be exactly what the developer wants or what the neighborhood wants, but there's got to be some kind of a conscious decision made. And we'll make a better decision if we get that feedback from the people who are going to live next to that item.
Well, in many cases, it's not a collaboration meeting, it's just an informational meeting, right? It's there to answer a lot of questions that the neighborhood has about the development that's going in. So they don't have angst in the back of their mind of what it could be. They have some type of idea what it is before it even gets to a commission or a council meeting. So those questions don't fester, you know, or they can redirect and answer, ask some other type of question that they really need to know the answer on. So, I mean, Lennar did a meeting on Ravinia before Ravinia ever developed, and that was at Lennar's headquarters, where they even had, I think our engineering staff was there and others. So, it's a good opportunity at least to learn.
Yeah, one of the things that we've tried to do is you don't mind setting really tough standards for developers, but what you'd really like to do is minimize the number of times that those standards change. First they say they want this, then they say they want that, then they say they want this. I know that when we were doing the Cook Lake property, residents got really involved, but it was by sending me letters, which then I had to respond to. And if they had had a meeting with the public first, they would have known lots of those objections and could have dealt with it before they ever brought it to us. And then we wouldn't, have this back and forth over and over again to try and resolve that issue. We could have. I mean, if the developer had listened carefully, it would have resolved some of those issues early on. It would have, I think, made a smoother process. It really encourages folks to show up, to pay attention early on. It means that, if you miss the meetings and the open house, now you bring it up. It makes the folks who are gonna complain no matter what, it makes their argument a little weaker, I think.
Yeah.
If there has been a chance to speak and they didn't take it.
Okay. Actually, first, I think, Corinne, did you have something you wanted to say? Oh, okay.
John Horn, you had your hand raised if you want to go ahead and click
Can you
unmute.
hear me okay?
Hear from you.
Yeah, my experience with this stuff has been
Hold
to
on a
get
sec,
that.
John. I gotta turn the volume up. Ooh, that's really loud. Try talking now.
Better?
John,
Is it
can
better
you hear us
now? Can you hear me?
John, we can't hear you. Give us just a moment here.
Always seems to be an
Trying-
audio output
trying again.
from that computer.
Yeah. Well, we've changed different.
It's coming out from there, from the TV.
You have the settings on Zoom, right?
Yeah, no, the Zoom settings are right. It's just something, well, now
Oh yeah.
I think it's same as this one.
Try that now.
Hey, John, can you try talking again?
We can hear you.
No, from there. That could work, or it could last us into this now.
Okay, John.
He's gone again. I had him for a second.
Just hand out that just in case. John?
Yeah.
Can kind of hear you. If you want to try to go, we can.
I was just gonna say, is it too soft or too loud?
It's too soft, but it's better than it used to be.
I've got my volume turned up all the way to 100%, so.
Yeah, we're having a speaker issue. Sorry about that.
So my experience has been to do the engagement as early as possible, just combat some of the, you've already made the decisions, you're talking to us too late in the process. Sometimes some of the challenges are things will change and people will say, well, you know, you didn't have good information when you met with me. But my experience has been to do it as early as possible. It also helps you identify if there's going to be big challenges in the neighborhood. At least you know that going in, and maybe when the applicant presents their sketch plan to the council, that could be a part of the presentation. We met with the neighbors, here's what we heard, here's what the challenges are. So at least you kind of identify the issues, identify the people that have a problem with the proposal, and you can work to try to do the process. It's probably better than having to do it halfway through the process or partially through the process, if you could hear that.
I think we got most of it. Thank you. Sorry, it's echoing here when I respond.
Who is that?
Commissioner Horn, Planning Commission. We're still pretty.
I always tell people when they have ideas or concepts that they should come to city council, just talk about them before they're, before they do any work or, you know, do anything official. And I think having immediate feedback is a terrible idea. Because somebody just wants to talk to us about some idea.
Right.
We don't need to bring in Pitchfork Nation to,
Yeah, I agree that I think the sweet spot is after sketch, but before it's an application, which is what Natalie was talking about.
I would agree.
I can definitely write it so that that's
Keeps it from
clear.
being like that where someone's just throwing out an idea just to try to get, you know, something going in terms of brainstorming, and could be something that we're totally against, and that's the end of it.
yeah.
But otherwise, they're gonna have potentially serious
Pitchfork
opposition.
Nation, is that what you said?
That,
Yeah. I think sometimes people forget that they can call us too, as if the only time they can come speak about anything is
Yeah.
during an actual process or whatever.
Right. And maybe, I don't know, something we could all look into also is, well, we could easily do it if we ever get the, some of the software for, you know, how you host and parse your
Yes, the
meetings.
agenda person.
Yes, that, but even short of that, maybe we could crop out part of like a concept plan and put it up on the development update page when one comes in. I don't know. Just thinking of ways where people can go back and look at some of the basic facts so that they can then, when they want to come in for the meeting, that initial meeting, or when it comes to council or anything like that, they have that history of the concept plan that they can go back and watch.
So like having like basically like a separate PUD development update site so that there's like information about incoming sketches, is that what you're stating? Or income, or sketches
I
or
think it
something?
would be
No.
in conjunction with our current.
Yeah, so like when you click on the development updates page and you get a project, because if it didn't go anywhere, then you wouldn't need to make a
I
post
see,
about it.
I see,
But if
okay.
it did, then let's say, you know, the McKee development's happening across the street, and you're going with a sketch plan, and you're gonna make a post about it, and we just put the video of that sketch plan on there.
I see, okay,
Back to one.
yeah, I think we could do that.
Just an idea, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are options that we could look into for that.
Okay.
Out of complete curiosity,
Yeah.
have you received developer feedback regarding this kind of a thing?
Shaking in the boots.
No, like, I'm just wondering from the other perspective, like, you know, and I guess the thing that I'm hung up on, I believe that feedback early, like, transparency, those are all good things that would benefit. My two concerns are this false empowerment feeling, right? Like, if, you know, understanding that, how do you just navigate that scenario when sometimes maybe the cannot believe that these words are gonna come out of my mouth, but the greater good has to surpass, right, an individual's desires. How do we navigate, helping folks through that? But then also, now I lost it because I got all hung up on the fact that those words came out of my mouth. I'm sorry. But from, because it's not a city-run meeting, then it is that opportunity, right, for that sort of input or interjection from the city, those disclosure statements. And I do not believe that it necessarily should be, because that just means more staff hours and more, like, so I'm not advocating for that. But I guess that's just what I'm saying is a potential, like, how do we, a potential hiccup. Because city isn't the one mediating that meeting. That's all.
I was kind of tagging on to that. I was thinking the problem seems to be the ones that I've seen people don't understand. It's already zoned that way. If they just follow code, they can still build it. I wonder if there'd be benefit, like a disclosure essentially, but the developer could read something at this that's kind of standard, that kind of just a very small educational statement as far as like, okay, this is zoned for I'm reading this statement. If I was a developer, like, I'm gonna read this statement. Hopefully that'll set the tone that, okay, the city asked me to read this. This is zoned for light industrial. That means we can build these kind of buildings. We have a few things that are, outside of that, but that is something, you know what I'm saying? Like some kind of a real basic educational thing that set the tone of it, because people they don't understand that.
They're capable of, absolutely capable of. Each one of us is empowered to have a lot of self-governance and to understand how our governing systems work.
But that might just
oftentimes
take
the motivation
the
doesn't
pressure
match.
off the developer. If they can, like, the city goes, okay, we got like canned statements for them to read, and they just read it, and that starts off I don't know what everybody else thinks about that. I feel like that could help educate.
I like your idea. I think we should record Kevin Mattson saying it and play it at the beginning of the meeting.
What Kevin said.
What Kevin says, I love it, in Kevin's corner.
I do like that idea, though. I mean, we'd have to figure out exactly what, and maybe it's something that could go out. So, like, if it's getting noticed, would that be sent out through the city to them, or would it be
No,
sent
they
out
would-
directly
they
by
would-
the
I mean,
developer?
The way Brooklyn Park did it, because they had a neighborhood meeting requirement for certain applications, they didn't have PUDs, but it was other applications where they would do it. I would maybe provide them with the addresses if I'd already pulled that list, but I didn't necessarily send those out.
Gotcha.
So.
Maybe it would just be a blurb that we
Yeah.
come up with that basic type of information. Say, make sure to include this in your notice that you're sending out. It can
Well,
either be on the
I
back of
think
the page or
to your
just so it's
point,
getting out there.
the development page, so if we are privy that, okay, they're now making plans to host a neighborhood meeting, now we need to post something, and then we could explain that there, and then ask the developer to point to that for the meeting to set kind of the basis. I think we could do that reasonably.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking like the 2040 stuff, like the business park where it's like, no, this is on this road here is on the plan. People, they have no idea. So they're here to complain about a road that's been on a plan for, so I don't know, if you get that early, even though it's still not a good thing, I guess you're still gonna be frustrated by it, at least to be aware that
Right.
maybe I didn't understand.
Yeah.
It was, I didn't
That makes sense. I think I get what you're saying then about being able to point to that on there.
Yeah, just so that we're not duplicating work.
Right.
Be-
No, yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah,
Can I
Tom,
ask just sort of a general question?
please.
You guys have 24 categories, and you need a score of 75% to even be considered for a PUD, if I understand this right. But you didn't need to try and get all 24 scores? Could somebody just kind of lay out what a developer would sort of bring to us in hopes of being a PUD?
Yeah, and Natalie, maybe you,
Yeah.
can you take that? It's
Yeah.
a
so-
little bit project specific, what categories and what your maximum is. And Natalie can probably explain how that works better than I can.
Yeah, exactly. So Maple Grove has a similar system already in place, and we kind of Frankensteined it a bit. And so the idea is, it's gonna be really difficult for any developer or any development to do all of these things. But they should be able to do most of these, and some of them, like some of these categories aren't gonna be relevant to all developments. Like there's one about keeping townhomes on on the interior of the development. While single-family zoned areas, even if they do a PUD, aren't gonna be able to have townhomes. So that's just gonna be an irrelevant category, and so that wouldn't be a part of the calculation. And then we also have some areas where there's bonus points, so if they don't meet those bonus categories, that doesn't get included in the calculation, but if they do, then that basically, it kind of helps reach that 75%. So basically let's say there's 300 points possible, but they do 2 bonus categories. The 300 points will stay 300, but then what they actually score, like let's say they were at 250 before, and now because they did the bonus points, they can get up to 280. So it's hard to explain, but we're trying to make it a little bit more have a little bit more of a formula with it, so that basically, and have some opportunities to make up points where they maybe couldn't do that reasonably, or that just wasn't gonna work with their vision, but also trying to have some flexibility and creativity as well. So that's kind of the goal of it. I hope that makes sense.
That's very helpful.
Okay.
Then I had actually one other question, this concerns the nature of open space. Lots of these talk about open space, and I saw one place where the sketch had like rental apartments or condominiums in a U shape, and there was an arrow pointing to the part in the middle as an open space. And I would say, that ain't no open space, that's the backyard. And so then from a kind of a parks and trails and nature's system, who maintains that? Is grass an open space? Is low prairie an open space? Is a space full of buckthorn an open space? Kind of who is going to maintain the space? If it's an HOA, that's great. And then I would also apply that, there was some talk about having roads with areas that featured monuments or historic fixtures. A historic house in Corcoran, many of them that are historic are about ready to fall down, or will be ready to fall down in about 20 years. And so there's maintenance and safety, and there's just a ton of issues that are tied in with that for me as I think about that. And I apologize, I don't know if you guys have worked on that at all. It just seemed like this is gonna get a lot more complicated in that area at least.
Natalie's excited to answer your
I
question.
got lots of stuff.
Oh.
All right.
My
so-
barn was built in 1908. It ain't falling down.
And well,
My house was built in 1926. It ain't falling down.
We had 2
I don't know if
barns
there's
fall this
historical.
last-
Yeah, I know we did.
house was built in
And I'm worried about 'em.
fall down, so-
I'm doing everything I can to preserve my stuff, Tom.
Thank you, Dean. That's-
You bet.
Okay, so open space. You're specifically talking about a category that's called creation of open space using multi-story buildings. This was identified as council as one of the categories that's already used in Maple Grove that you wanted to use. We can definitely take it out. So that's what that's showing. It's an apartment building that's centered around an open space. So if we don't like that, then well, you can get rid of that category, but the idea is to try to have open space available for the residents that's building, and then we have points elsewhere that if they choose to make that open space available to the larger community as well. Generally speaking, unless it's part of a park dedication agreement, if it's a open space that's not owned by the city, then it would be HOA maintained, and the developer will have to submit a open space management plan. So things like buckthorn and things that would all have to be a part of their management plan. But yes, grass and open prairie space could theoretically count as open space. That's why there's additional bonus points for areas that they preserve trees as a part of that open space. So just because theoretically, open space can just be a field.
Absolutely can. That can be quite wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a time and a place for that as well. And then you said, what was the next part?
Historic structures.
Historic structures.
And others.
So I tried to, I hear what you're saying, and I didn't want to penalize a developer for having to remove a structure that's just structurally unsound. So I tried to be flexible with that category, that they could get some points for basically efforts to retain where it is possible. But if if they have something saying that it is structurally unsound, then that category of points would not count against them.
And I mean, if something is is structurally sound now, it's not gonna be structurally sound forever. And you can, I mean, I think, you know, Minneapolis is trying to, there's an issue with the early houses there. The prospect of taking it apart, putting it in storage, finding a place to move it to, I mean, it just, that can get to be really, really an onerous, for a homeowners association. Trying to have something exist long beyond its kind of natural.
And I think we could still encourage it, but then, yeah, if it needs to come down, it wouldn't be a penalty, so maybe I can make that clear, that, you know, basically encourage that it remains for the life of the building, and then once it's structurally unsound, they wouldn't be expected to maintain that. I don't think it might be a points clarification, I don't think it
You
would.
wouldn't tear down the neighborhood because the structure that was historic when it was created.
Right, it needs
is
to be
no longer
torn down,
there.
yeah,
Then you put up a plaque saying on this site.
right,
Yeah.
the statue of the
Jensen
barn.
House.
Tom Anderson stood here one day.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, some kind of plaque, so maybe I could add a disclaimer to the points for that, you know, we wouldn't expect a historical building to remain in perpetuity if it becomes a problem, but we would want some kind of plaque in place of it once it gets torn down. I mean, you know.
Something like that.
Yeah, when you look at Pierre Bontneau's house in Maple Grove, the amount of money they was taken to preserve that and then move it to Public Works, that was crazy.
Yeah.
How do we treat open space with regards to park dedication?
This would be in addition to park dedication. I think I put something in there. So for the PUDs that require additional open space. Let me wrap my head around this one more time. So this would be in addition to their park dedication requirements.
Okay.
Unless you guys chose to accept something that is open space as a park for whatever reason. I think that's, from my understanding, what happened with Tavera, if I'm understanding correctly. It's either Tavera or Bellwether. Oh no, Tavera needed an extra park. And so, the previous council had decided that another park, even though it wasn't on our comp plan, did need to go there because of the demand that Tavera created. But that space is going to be fairly open, so that could count as their open space requirement since it was park dedication above and beyond our comp plan. So that gives you guys flexibility to decide if it is open space that you want to accept as park dedication, but it wouldn't count towards it unless you guys want it.
Wanted it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think so.
I would say too, then if, let's say you have a trail running through open space, that portion that's trail is deducted.
I can clarify that. I think that makes
So
sense.
it's not factored into the amount of open space.
Okay.
And then the
Sorry,
open,
Wait.
deducted from park dedication or deducted from?
No, I
open
mean,
space?
it's not, you can't say, I got 15 acres, right, and I've got a trail running right through the middle of it. It's not 15 acres, because the trail takes away from the 15.
Does it?
I would give them credit for that personally, because
Then they're getting double credit, because they're getting probably credit for parks and trails dedication then as well.
I would maybe not give them park and trail dedication for that trail, because it would be part of the open space. But I wouldn't say that it's not open space because of where the trail is.
So I think it would depend on if it's a public or private trail. If we're accepting it as a public trail, then it would count towards park dedication.
I would think so.
So I think if that's the case, if it's a trail that's on the comp plan, then we would, according to this draft, we would take out the portion of the trail that, in terms of the land calculation for open space. And I think that does make sense. And if it's a trail that's not in the comp plan that they're making public, then you guys, again, would decide if it's something that you're keeping, or if it's gonna be a private trail that they just allow public access to.
Well, and it has been that private trail, or private amenities have gotten some park dedication credit.
Yes.
The example being Ravinia with their amenity center and pool.
Bellwether.
And Bellwether, yeah.
So I think in that situation where it's not on our comp plan, I think it would count as open space, but if it is on our, based on the current draft, but if it is on our comp plan, it was something that was expected of them either way, then that portion of the trail would not count towards the open space requirement. I think that makes sense.
Is a sidewalk considered a trail?
No.
I just.
There's difference.
question.
Sidewalks are maintained by the owner of the property, or the HOA. Trails are maintained by the city.
If we own them.
Yeah, they will be.
They will be owned by us.
And then,
So they make a sidewalk a trail and they pass the buck to us. We can enjoy it for perpetuity.
That open space, I guess, a sidewalk, yeah.
my big thing on park dedication, and I think Jeremy said it a while back, is I'd like to see more of that dedication if they're gonna dedicate land to be upland instead of wetland or swamp. Is that a factor
Yeah, the.
in here? I was
open-
trying to read quickly and,
Open space shall consist of upland and be calculated
Okay.
on a net basis, yeah, so I heard you guys.
wetland is wetland, upland is upland and usable for parks, which would make it more palatable to be park dedication.
We don't take wetland, but.
Right.
I'm going back to your park in Ravinia, the public park in
Yeah,
Ravinia.
it's
You
like
got-
7 acres, but 6 of them are wetland.
You're right.
Yeah.
The chart you have for open space requirements and percentages, where did we come up with these percents?
So I kind of went to Dayton, but it's not quite what I wanted, and so I just honestly did this as a basis of discussion. I was expecting some additional feedback, but
Okay.
the biggest starting point that I had is, they can do a straight plat with 65-foot lots under RSF 3. So if they're saying they're not gonna go any lower than a 65-foot lot, then it's reasonable to me that they wouldn't be required additional open space dedication. But then, having a graduated tier downwards, so, we have seen some 44-foot lots, I believe in Bellwether. So I think, reasonably, I don't see it going too much more under 45.
No,
So
I
we could
would-
definitely adjust it from,
I wouldn't go down that. What I would do is I would change the percent requirements.
okay?
So as the lots go down, instead of being 5, 10, and 15, I would be more like 10, 15, and 20. And then if we do adopt the point scale system, I would suggest that we give points for lots that are greater than 65 feet. And put incentives on,
Or some lots greater than 65 feet?
well, some is subjective, right? They come in with some. The problem is too, to John's point, they come in with lots 65 feet, and 2 years later, they ask for 55 foot lots. So these things, if they're on a point scale system of some kind, they shouldn't be negotiable after
They
the
shouldn't
fact.
come
Yeah.
back and
I mean, I think
ask less.
it would basically make it so if they got approvals with, and using this example, 65-foot lots and wanted to change it, they'd have to find whatever X percent of open space to
Right.
free up, which is not likely, so not gonna be able to change it.
Right.
I think we can do, I think with the 20%, we run into, so when we looked at that conservation subdivision option a couple years ago now, or a year ago, I think 20%, the lots got really tiny, and now we're talking pretty much twin homes.
We are talking with tiny lots in that example.
Well, yeah, I'm saying we're probably, with the 20% open space, in addition to what they need to dedicate for park dedication, we could be, and then like the wetlands and everything, we're no longer talking about single-family homes likely, we're talking about twin homes, is what I'm trying to say. Whereas Bellwether has 44-foot lots that are single-family homes. So I think that's where I was trying to keep at 15%, because I think we can make that work with the additional open space, or with the additional land requirements they might have for park dedication. 'Cause I'm trying to just work many pieces.
Yeah, no,
So-
okay, I get what you're saying there.
I have another way you could think about it. I like your thought process with changing the percentages. Another way you could approach it, rather than incrementing the open space requirement up quite as far, you could look at different lot width thresholds instead. So I understand you took the RSF 3 as the no requirement, but that kind of invalidates the reason for having RSF 2. So what if you had the 0 requirement at the midpoint, 72 feet? So if at 72 feet, you would have none. And then if you were between, say, 65 and 72 feet, maybe you require 7% instead of 5% in that first row.
Okay,
And if you did, the next row would be 55 feet to 65 feet, then maybe that's 12.
okay.
And then the less than 45 could become less than 55, and that would be the 15.
Okay. I think that's,
So you never get to 20, but you start getting open space with larger lots than you would under the other approach.
And that kind of leads into a question I had, which is, for the most part, we're going to be seeing developments that are zoned urban reserve, guided, low-density residential for a residential development, obviously. What are we using to determine the underlying zoning for a PUD of that nature? Is it just based on the proposed lot sizes? Because then they could just propose them to be smaller and it's closest to RSF 3, and then that's the standard.
I think so far, when we've talked about PUDs, that's usually what we're looking at are the RSF 3 standards. I believe Tavera was compared with RSF 3. Walcott Glen was compared with RSF 3 as the underlying district.
I don't think I got it either time when that was. I didn't understand why that was.
Yeah. So, and then I think, and I can maybe word it, but I think I tried to create the draft so that we're looking at the underlying land use. I do say underlying zone district. So I can try to clarify that we're looking at the underlying land use and underlying zoning districts. So, no, actually, I thought this through. I have a table. So, let's see here. So the underlying land use, I think we could choose between RSF 1, RSF 2, and RSF 3. So if it is something that is 72-foot lots, then I could clarify that that's RSF 2. And then if we're talking about 65-foot, that's, or anything less than that would be RSF 3. That's the underlying district that we're comparing it against.
Well, RSF2, I think, is 80 feet.
It's true. So just pretty much everything is RSF 3, I guess, would be for PUDs, because they're generally looking for less lot size than RSF 2. So,
Unless they're asking for a small amount of flexibility and lot width, but other flexibility.
yeah, well, and then I think that's possible. And then we kind of touched on this for a second. Counselor Schultz, it's having points for lots that are bigger. I do think there was a Maple Grove category that had something, we didn't keep it, but we could try to look at making it a little bit more what we want, encouraging, maybe having less of a unclear word like some, but encouraging a variety of lot sizes with a certain percentage, being over 65 feet, kind of what Dayton does have in their zoning district, and having points for that. That could be something I could add as a category if that's of interest. But I don't think it's realistic that we would see, maybe they would get some points, they'd get like half points if it's like 50% of the lots or something like that. I'd have to look at it, but having some kind of point scale for when we see lots that are more than 44 feet, for example. But just-
Yeah, I don't know if we'd want to set the bar necessarily that low. I want to make sure we're not dissuading. It seems very unlikely that we're suddenly going to get a development come in and say, we want to do all 80-foot lots or 75-foot lots, because it's never happened. I don't think it's likely to happen, but I still want the option to be there for them to do that with a PUD even. Because then I don't think we have as much of the need for that significant open space, like the chart shows. If we're getting 80-foot lots or 75 and 80-foot lots, we're doing fine in comparison to what we've been seeing in general, and what, not just us, just everyone. So I want to make sure we're not eliminating that option or dissuading people from being able to do that.
So I could look at try to think through some verbiage. I'm not so great on the spot.
Fair enough,
But,
fair enough.
If we're in agreement that we'd like some kind of points category to encourage larger lot sizes of some variety, then I think that I can try to work something in there.
Perfect. What do you guys think?
You talk about point categories and weightings. Is that a,
Sure, we can in 1 second. I was just asking on that last thing Natalie said.
I think it's a great idea, because personally, I would rather see the land owned by someone who can use that land for what they want to use it for, rather than it just being an open space for a neighborhood, right? Because then no one individual person can do anything with that land. We're
Right.
at the mercy of an HOA doing what they believe is in the best interest of that property. So yes, I would, anything that encourages those lots to be larger so that
Yeah.
people could own it, I think would be a benefit.
There's a question here about considering minimum lot size and minimum depth. Is there any appetite in council to consider minimum lot size too?
Where do you see that?
We
It's
do
on page
have minimum
2
lot
of the-
size in code. You mean within the PUD requirement? Like add another requirement there?
Yeah, I mean, right now, we're talking mostly lot widths, and I guess we do have a standard lot size, right? So that can change. But as far as the minimum for PUD, the narrower you go, the longer they get, right?
Mhm.
So, you're talking about adding a,
I guess I would rather see a wider lot, but if that, they could make wider and shorter, and then you still don't get a very big lot.
right. So having something in the PUD ordinance that gives a minimum that they could flatten that lot to, so they're not just making it wide and,
Well, yeah, I mean, the minimum we're talking about here before with the open, but if we encourage them to have wider lots, they could bring the lot widths down, right, and then stack more homes or more streets in that regard in some cases.
yeah.
I mean, what's the minimum lot size now in RSF three?
I'm pulling that up right now. I believe it's 6,500.
So 6,500 is a pretty small lot size.
Let me just verify
Is
that.
that like 0.15 acres or something like that?
Yeah, well, because we're trying to get, with RSF, we're trying to get 3 to 5 units per acre, so I think that's what.
We got people trying to build buildings on their property that size.
Or larger.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay, I'm sorry, so it's
Didn't we just have one
7,500 and RSF three is the minimum lot size,
7,500?
with a 65-foot minimum lot width. Minimum lot depth is not identified on this table for RSF three. I think that's something that we have more outlined in our rural residential. I could look at the other ones real quick here.
What was the size, did you say, sorry?
7,500 is
Oh,
the
okay.
minimum lot size for RSF three.
So would it be as simple as just saying that is the minimum and you can't PUD negotiate for smaller than that?
Yeah, I wouldn't go any smaller than that, 0.17 acres.
So we can give them the
That's
option of
tiny.
doing the bigger lots and not having the additional open space. If they go smaller, they're gonna have to give the open space, but regardless of how they configure the lots, they can only make it so, the height of it or the depth of it so little before they're gonna hit that minimum lot
Right.
size. Yeah.
RSF three is 7,500.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so does that make sense, Natalie, to have it so that that's just not a negotiable?
Square feet,
For a lot.
yeah.
Nope.
I'm trying so hard to write this in a way where we don't have to grant a variance later on. So I think trying to say that that's non-negotiable when we don't have a plan in front of us might be difficult. Dayton's minimum lot size that they use in their RF2 district, or R3 district, which is basically what they have in place instead of a PUD, like an option instead of a PUD, 6,500, that's the minimum lot size for that district.
That's tiny.
So, I would just like to, if we want to go down that route, I would just want to analyze something a little bit more like concrete than making that off the fly here, just because I really want to avoid using a variance in the PUD.
So you're speaking only about PUDs. So if you had, I mean, a minimum lot size, in anything,
What I was,
wouldn't you wanna, we just aren't thinking about something that, like if somebody came in here and they had, I don't know, 10 acres and they put a bunch of houses in a little corner, and tiny houses, and the rest was like this big open area. okay with small lots if you get a whole bunch in return for that.
And to be fair, that was my question, if we wanted to add something, if instead of lot width, we wanted to go by lot size on the open space table, or if we wanted to have that as a component somehow. It was more tying it to the open space requirement. That's where the question came from, not necessarily
Gotcha.
requiring that as a standard.
Or percent, I mean, almost what I think you're saying there is, it's like the percentage of the lot that's used by a structure, if it's below some, if it's, hits some threshold, that's okay, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, it's a little bit like out in the hinterlands, if you've got 100 acres and you put 10 houses in one little corner, all of a sudden we have 95 acres of total open space. Even, the.
Yeah, but
so
even
different
that
lots.
would be acre lots.
Tenth of an acre.
No,
If you had 100 acres,
We
No,
had,
I'm
we had
saying-
a
yeah.
concept plan that came in like that, where they wanted to put a bunch of little homes in one tiny bit of the corner of the property, and then the whole thing was gonna be open.
with smaller lots than 6,500 or
They
7,500.
were
Well, they were
tiny,
tiny
remember?
lots,
And
yeah.
they had a centralized well, or a septic, right?
Yeah, so on with our
Yeah,
open
the
space and
running
preservation plat that can be used in the rural, residential, and urban reserve, there is no minimum lot size.
Right. Okay.
What a cool thing to preserve, though. I mean,
that's what I'm
if they
saying.
maintain it in a good state, that would be great.
Right in the middle of like these neighborhood, I don't know, I'm just saying like, we shouldn't close our mind off to something that, I mean, in theory, if they put like a 5,000 square foot home on a 7,000 square foot lot, no one's gonna do that. It just depends on what,
So you're saying just leave it as is with just the width requirement? Or
You
the
can
width?
always
Like, no
add
minimum.
if you need to. I mean, maybe we find that there's
I
an
don't know.
advantage later. But
I don't.
I
That's
thought
all I'll
lot
say. I'm not
size-
not gonna die on that hill.
No, I'm just trying to understand it.
I thought lot size
agree with
was
you.
determined, or building pad size was determined off of lot size, percentage off of lot size,
Not
isn't
in a
it?
PUD, you can adjust things.
there are setbacks that'll set a practical.
Yeah, there's setbacks. When I did an analysis of like an impervious surface limit in residential, it became very clear that the developer is gonna be able to comply, but it's gonna be the homeowner wanting to add a deck, they're not gonna be able to comply.
Right.
So then we're granting variances.
And we've had that,
So I'm trying, so again,
Fortunate.
trying to think long-term of the practicality of it, and so I think an impervious surface limit is gonna be difficult to really, truly enforce, and it's not gonna really be the developer that we're, enforcing it with, it's gonna be the resident.
Well, and I think long-term, the other thinking needs to be, who do we want to own the majority of open land in our city? And do we want it to be a bunch of HOAs that are preserving and
Yeah,
owning
that drives
that
me
land?
nuts,
And I
too.
think, I know that that's what the current environment is of development is driving home, but I don't think that that benefits a homeowner at all. I think that that means that they incur these HOA fees for the duration of time that they live where they live, and they don't have access to land to do things that you do when you own land. And so I think I understand what the driver is, but that is my concern as I see all of the development that's come in here, is that it's less land being owned by individuals and more land being owned by companies. So
Gotcha.
I don't know how we'll do that.
Aren't HOAs, the
They're the-
companies don't own them, the
Residents.
development.
They run them at
Yeah, the
first
residents
until,
do.
Yeah.
And I hear what you're saying, but I live in a townhome association, and there's this big wide open field, that's right in the central of everything, and that does really get used quite a bit, and you can have like a grad party there and things like that. So it is very accessible and open, and I don't mind that it's in my fees. So, I mean, just as someone who actually is living in an HOA, and I don't know if anyone else is comfortable speaking with their experience.
I just think as long as we have a mix, that's my thing, and right now I don't think we have a mix, cause even the rural residential Bechtold Farms that went in has an association. So here people own these large plats of land, but there's an association determining what they can and cannot do with their land.
We didn't require the association, though, that was the
I know,
developer.
that was why that was one of the things I wanted to understand, is that does the city have any ability in this PUD process to say, hey, you know, we'll give you some flexibility, but we want the neighborhood to come in without this. I don't know. Everybody tells me that it's the consumers that are driving, that's what they want. And I feel like I can see that. There are definitely people who want that and want to live in neighborhoods like that, but I also feel like there are people who don't want to live in neighborhoods like that. And so, right. And so if we can, just as we watch these developments come in, is there a balance? And so far, in the new developments that have come in Corcoran in the last couple of years, there has not been a balance, so.
And
Well,
I keep hearing from a lot of the folks that are coming into these, I didn't move to this town to see more development. But yet you've got houses 7.5 feet away from each other you're living in, and then you're complaining you gotta walk a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile to a HOA-owned park or a city park that's close. And it's like, why did you buy a home with no yard? Why didn't you find a home that had a yard? And I said that a while back, I'd rather see normal-sized houses on bigger properties, and then the person is responsible for their own yard, and they've got places to be and play and entertain and stuff, and it's not shared by anybody.
I'll just play devil's advocate. Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Housing costs are going up significantly.
I know.
And land is a huge part of that. And so if people can share in the cost of land, it does make it more accessible for people. And so that's why when developers say the market is driving it, they're dealing with a lot of inflated costs right now. That in land is like one of the biggest factors. And so if the goal is to also make sure that home ownership is accessible within Corcoran, the idea of sharing some of that cost of land is for getting some open space and it's accessible. And that it is a requirement that the open space be accessible, whether or not they have to walk a mile, you know, that's gonna be up to them, but.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I really, like, I do understand that there is a segment of the population that longs for that. I'm just looking again at, I don't know if there's any way to impact, but everything that has come in has been an association with smaller lots and open public space. And so I don't want to your point, if somebody wants to come in and build a neighborhood, where, you know, they maintain all the mature trees and they make nice big wide lots, I don't want something that deters that.
Right.
I would argue that a part of what's driving land costs is taxes, but that's a different conversation for a different time.
Bad state and county policies.
So,
But we run into the Met Council of, we have to have 3 per acre.
yeah.
You know, that's kind of an overriding thing
Yeah.
too. It's
Yep.
hard to.
Yeah.
So the way we
Have-
control that is by determining where the MUSA line is, right? So if the MUSA line doesn't move, then you maintain all of the area where you have bigger lot sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one lever that we can pull.
And I would say some of those rural developments that have association has nothing to do with the lot size, it's they want to do private drives.
Yeah.
And so then you need a maintenance agreement, and so that usually will trigger an HOA. So it's more than just like the combined open space that will drive the need for an HOA, and then sometimes a developer will just decide that this is what I want to provide to my clientele is an HOA with amenities, and this is how, you know, and so there's a little bit more to it than the open space. I definitely would say that this would require HOAs, but I think with small lot sizes like that, you're probably gonna have an HOA anyways. That's just kind of how things are. I have a friend who lives in Watertown, and I drove to it, and it looked just like Ravinia, and she said it wasn't an HOA, and I was like, what? So I have to talk with Watertown to see how they're doing it. I was so surprised. But they just don't have any, but they were really small even without the HOA. They were really small lots. But I think with the benefit of an HOA is sometimes there's additional amenities that people are getting.
Sure, I can see all of those things, and definitely concede to all those points.
But I do think that there wouldn't be anything that would prevent us from, if someone came in with wide lots almost to code or at code, maybe it was asking for flexibility in different areas, which is why it's a PUD. There's not the open space requirement. In addition, we wouldn't require them to
Correct,
have
and you
a
guys could, if
HOA.
they say like, this is the only reason why we need an HOA, we don't want to do it, and they do an open space and we're okay with accepting it as parkland,
Or
then
that.
they wouldn't need an HOA. So that would be, that's again why I tried to write in that flexibility with the open space calculation. So I think there is some room for us to be able to to say, no, you don't need an HOA, but then we would have to accept it as parkland, if it's something like that.
If there was,
If it's below lot sizes. If it meets the 72 that you
Right.
identified, then, yeah,
Then
they
no,
would be able
so
to
there
avoid
wouldn't
the
be
open
a-
space requirement altogether.
yeah,
My neighbors are
okay. That makes sense, yeah. Mark?
I've already shared my thoughts on the point system and the supermajority issues, and I think that my feedback was included in the previous packet. Over the years, the developments in Corcoran have had, at least at the preliminary stage, a lot in common. For example, in December of 2013, the staff report for what was then the preliminary PUD for Ravinia said, quote, "The city has a relatively high level of discretion in approving or denying a rezoning application. The city has a relatively high level of discretion in approving PUDs." That application was obviously approved. For the Tavera neighborhood, quote, "The city has a relatively high level of discretion in approving PUDs." That application was approved. For Rush Creek Reserve, quote, "The city has a relatively high level of discretion in approving a PUD." That application was approved. For the Bellwether development, quote, "The city has a relatively high level of discretion in approving a PUD." That application was approved. In May of 2022, the Walcott Glen development, quote, "The city has a relatively high level of discretion in approving a PUD." That application was approved. While not a neighborhood, in October of 2022, the industrial park, quote, "The city has a relatively high level of discretion in approving a PUD." That application was approved in December. So you get the idea, and that is why I think it's interesting that a vision item, a high priority one no less, is to quote, "end cookie cutter developments." It would seem to me that the PUD ordinance already has a built-in check on unfettered development, and that check is this city council. I would urge this council to maintain its discretion and not get locked into a subjective plan of points, bonus points, across 24 confusing categories. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, Mark? When you say that your concern is that we'd get locked into something, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, once you codify something, you're supposed to follow it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are representing to developers, here are the points, and if you comply with this point system, you will get X.
I think,
You're locked into that decision.
but I think what the conversation was last time was that we and I think it's in the draft somewhere,
Highlighted it.
that it's not guaranteeing or even implying that they will get approval because of this. It's that if they don't meet the minimums, it doesn't get to the council or to the planning commission,
Correct.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just a guideline and it's not being put into city code?
It'd be put into code, but it would be setting the minimum to get
The council.
to council or
Yes.
to the planning commission, as
It-
opposed to you hit this, you're approved.
It's the minimum for staff recommendation of approval, essentially.
Okay, so we're putting, and thank you, this is helpful to
Yeah.
help me understand this, because I don't entirely understand the point system
Okay.
and how it's possibly going to be objective. It seems subjective to me, and it seems as though we're getting locked into a position unnecessarily when perhaps it's not necessary.
Gotcha. Oh,
Thank you.
yeah, appreciate it.
One of the things I think that when we are looking at a PUD, one of the arguments that we see sometimes is, without a PUD, your neighborhood, you know, this is a residential housing neighborhood, and if it went straight code, your neighborhood would look like this. So like, the default of our code, if nobody did a PUD, our city would look exactly what we don't want it to look like.
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, if there was all 80-foot lots, that would be a beneficial as opposed to the mix of, you know, what Ravinia has a couple 80-foot lots that they initially said they'd build, and most of them changed to 70, 75, 65, 60 throughout the development.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree that
I
there'd be
feel like
some
the-
aspects that would be more cookie cutter development that we wouldn't want.
The fallback position of a code development sucks. If we want to have, so I get hung up a little bit on the PUD process, and I don't want to have to say, well, we get a little bit something in the PUD. It should be a little higher hurdle than if this was just put in by code specs. It would be really stale and boring, and so a high hurdle on a PUD is gonna push people down to a regular old. I'm worried about that.
It'll push people away from PUD.
Yeah, and I kind of thought at the beginning of this process that we are going to raise the standard for all development. And we've raised the standard for PUD, which might have the opposite effect of what we're trying to do and make people come in here with standard development rather than a PUD.
I think part of my problem with PUD is, when you read these PUDs, they talk about the public benefit of it, and the benefit of infrastructure, and the benefit of parks, and the benefit of this and that, right? Well, the city's not gonna front the money put the streets in. So the public benefit of the street is for the developers, so they can sell homes. Same with the park that's going there. If they didn't put a park there and they didn't put streets in, they'd never sell a lot. So I think that's a false statement. And while I kind of agree with
Wait,
you on the point system.
False statement for me?
No, the
Oh.
public benefits
Oh,
side of it.
yeah.
And so, while I agree with you on the point system, I would hope that if we are gonna go down a point system, we really show where we're actually benefiting out of this PUD thing. Because in my mind, public streets and public parks in a development that was a plain field is to the benefit of the developer to sell the home. And beyond that point, it's whoever lives there gets some benefit, but the real benefit is for the developer.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Councilman, thank you. And let me ask though, if you don't like the baseline of what a neighborhood would look like when the developers follow code, then why not edit code? And bring our code more in line with what the city council, with what your vision is?
That's what I'm saying is,
And I don't,
I think we're missing.
I think that might
An
be a great
opportunity.
thing to focus on.
yeah, I don't know that one
2024.
precludes the other.
Because
But
if you do that now, like if we were to refocus from PUD to, let's make the code what we want for the underlying design standards and lot sizes and everything else, people just go to PUD to avoid code today anyway. So you don't really fix anything with that approach. I think the approach would be you adjust the rules that we use to operate the system that's being exercised today, and maybe in parallel or as a fast follow-on, you
Yeah.
look at what do we do next to make sure that we don't just open a floodgate over here that gets us more things that we don't like.
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying we need to stop this process. We're almost out of time today, and we
Yeah.
just, this point system, I have some, we talked about, I have some issues with it too, and I think it's a worthy more time than
let's get it on another
5
agenda.
minutes to hash that out.
Yep.
There you go. That'll make it last longer. Take it down.
The clock,
We don't care what time it is anymore.
this clock keeps on moving ahead, and so I just realized
Do you think
I'm
that's-
giving you a slightly false idea, but we do have to rearrange the space
Yes.
as well.
And I think I said it last time too, that I have reservations about the point system because I know how it backed Maple Grove into a couple of corners. And we all know that the first thing isn't the right thing and it has to be massaged and made better. But we gotta not be afraid to say no to PUDs. If it's not right, we should say no.
Well, and I do want to say, I completely agree with you. It's all, you know, a parallel course correction.
Yep.
Let's say we rely on PUDs now because the fix is a little easier. But let's keep our eye on the goal, perhaps in 2024 with this additional new language, and then we start relying less and less on PUDs. So, and I do want to thank you for educating me because I was a little confused on
Yeah,
the
totally understandable.
issue. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all for coming and your feedback on this. I know staff's itching to get this room swapped out. In terms of discussing the point system in more detail, should we get that in one more work session?
We just do it as part of a council
Or
meeting.
council
Do we have
meeting?
anything-
Part of a council meeting if we got a late meeting, yeah.
Let's
We
get
have a
on
meeting
one of the
tonight.
upcoming agendas.
What about you guys?
If-
The point system, do we want the planning commission in on that conversation?
When's the next meeting, planning commission?
The next meeting won't be until March. March 2nd. So we would likely, the February 23rd meeting has a lot of items on it.
So we probably wouldn't be
would
doing it there
likely,
anyway?
Staff would suggest looking at the March 9th meeting.
For council?
Just based for.
So maybe if we could get it on planning, as just a discussion, if there's anything that catches your guys' eyes about what's included in the point system, how it's weighted, just a brief discussion on that at that meeting. Would that work?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Perfect, and then we'll bring it up on the night.
I would suggest to try to think of what's truly public benefit.
Yeah, I can do
That you want to see.
Good, okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. We already lost one council member.
Okay.
Do we have a second? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.